What's crack like? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and we're in week 12 of college football, just wrapped up, and yeah, there was a lot of exciting prospect matchups, but I'm going to get into my positional rankings later this week, and I'll talk about that. The bigger story coming out of this weekend was Tua, the injury, and what does that mean for his draft stock. I'm going to kind of go over that today in this week's scouting report, but yeah, man, wild and crazy. But Tuesday, tomorrow, yes, the day after this, the day you probably after see this, after you see this, words are tough, right? I got a mock draft coming out, new one, and with the latest that's happened to Tua, it's going to be definitely an interesting mock draft. So be sure you check that out. Let's go ahead, let's get into the nitty gritty. Now, I got a large majority of this information from Dr. Michael Banfi, and I'll leave a link to the article in the description below, because I'm not a doctor. I will never claim to be a doctor. So I'm taking his information and I'm giving you my opinion on how this affects his draft stock and what I've researched and what I've heard how this will affect his draft stock. So keep that in mind. I can't do your daily checkup, man. I can't tell you if you're sick. I can't even tell if I'm sick. I think I got a sinus infection, man. I'm falling apart. But let's go into what happened to Tua. We all saw the injury. It didn't look serious at first. If anything, people thought, oh, he busted his nose or something. But after that, we could tell he suffered a dislocated hip, a posterior fracture. Now, what he did here, and I have it in a very crude picture here. He fell on his right knee, and what happened is the femur, it went right through the back of the hip socket. Like, it went through, causing chips into the hip socket. Now, this injury, this type of injury, it's commonly associated with a traumatic car accident. Not being tackled in football. So crazy. Actually, this injury in football only happens about 1%. People are calling it a freak accident. It's that rare. And important note that this wasn't medically linked with the ankle injury he suffered prior this season. So there's no correlation between this injury and that injury, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, you know? Because, like, and this is the weird thing. It's like, oh, thank goodness it's not related to the ankle. It wasn't, you know, his ankle giving out and causing this. But it's like, this is a separate injury altogether. Tua's starting to garner this reputation of being, like, his body being frail. Like, will his body be able to hold up at the NFL level taking hits? So, now red flags starting to appear, which they've kind of already been there. This is kind of just the icing on the cake. This is kind of like this is the final top, and like, I don't know if we can trust this guy. But this is where things get a little more serious, because now we're seeing people make correlations or connections between Tua's injury and the same one Bo Jackson suffered that ultimately ended his career. Now, it's the same fracture that both Tua and Jackson had, but there is a big difference, because what happened with Jackson, right? He suffered from avascular necrosis, or AVN, and after his fracture and dislocation. So, and that's what ultimately ended Jackson's career. It ended up causing arthritis, and he just wasn't able to move the same anymore. And for a running back or a receiver, that's devastating. For a quarterback, not so much. Ask Tom Brady. You can make a living off not moving. Peyton Manning, you don't necessarily have to be the most mobile or fast quarterback to succeed at the NFL level. And so what this avascular necrosis, or AVN, is, it's basically where the blood vessels around the hip, they're torn or they're stretched for a prolonged period of time, and during that time it causes the bone to lose blood supply, or loses some of its blood supply, and in Dr. Banfi's words, basically it causes death of the bone. So that's what happened to Bo Jackson. Now, the night of the injury, Tua, he had the hip popped back into socket. Now, this should minimize the risk of AVN, so that's huge. In fact, Tua's having surgery today, on Monday, having hip surgery in Houston to minimize the risk for future arthroscopic procedures, and basically to decrease the risk of arthritis down the road. Now, there's a video, I'll have it in the little iCard, I'll have it in the description, that better describes basically the injury, what's going on, how they're treating it. Now, let's just take a look at the recovery time, because without surgery, recovery time is about 3 to 6 months. Let's just assume they're probably going to be very conservative when it comes to this. It's going to be 6 months, which likely means he won't be able to participate. Well, no, definitely means he won't be able to participate for the combine or participate in the combine and his pro day. But we will know medically about his potentials of AVN, which is huge. That's like the biggest thing right now. If that will be a risk. So now, what does this mean for his draft status and stock? I think this is an easy one for his status. He's gonna be in the draft. I don't know why people are saying, oh, I think he should go back to Alabama, and what's there to prove? Like, if he goes down hurt, there ain't no way, there's no chance he's gonna be a first-round pick at that point. You have nothing to gain by returning to school. You've already lost millions because of this injury. There's no sense in losing more. So he's coming out. That's what's going to happen. Now, it's safe to say he won't have, we already talked about it earlier, he won't have the same mobility or speed, but that's not going to, I think that's not going to be, that's not crippling. It shouldn't affect him as a passer. He is one of the best deep ball passers. He's one of the most accurate deep ball passers in college football. That's what makes him such an intriguing and such a great prospect. His ability to throw that deep ball. Now, assuming everything goes well with the surgery, arthritis will be his biggest long-term worry. That will be the biggest worry. I already talked about the big medical red flag over the last 2 seasons. Tua has been pretty banged up, and that I think this all, even if his recovery is going well, will knock him out of those top picks in the draft. I mean, I've talked about it already on this channel. When it comes to Tua, sources say, everywhere I read, majority of people will tell you that many NFL teams aren't as high on Tua as most analysts or scouts. Now, the team that has been reportedly the most high on Tua, the Dolphins, I think this completely knocks Tua off their board. Follow me on this. Now, Tua, where I see him getting picked now, what type of teams that will be actively pursuing him are teams that aren't in total rebuilds. Because when you're in a rebuild and you're a GM, you're a coach, you're not going to stake your job on a franchise quarterback that you don't know if they'll even be able to stay on the field. You might be getting kind of this Jake Locker type of situation. It's more like a Jake Lock where all these injuries start piling up. You don't want to risk your job on an injury-prone quarterback. This is the most important player on your roster. You don't want to stake your job on that. However, teams that are willing to go out and get Tua, I think those teams that are more complete, they're just looking for a quarterback for the future. They might even have a quarterback in place now. And I think where Tua becomes a very tantalizing prospect, a very tantalizing pick, is at pick 13, currently pick 13, is the Chargers, or Phillip Rivers. He's a free agent, but they could bring him back. Tua, you probably shouldn't start Tua immediately. He is no longer that plug-and-play type prospect. He is a guy you want to sit and see how, you want to just sit and see how he recovers. You want to see how he comes back from this type of injury. Now, we all know all the talent Tua has. That's what makes him a great prospect. So that's what makes him a great value for a team like the Chargers, who is like, okay, we now have our potential heir apparent. I think Tua holds a lot of value to those teams. Teams like even coming up here, right? The Titans, who right now they have Ryan Tannehill. Yeah, they can improve upon him, but they don't necessarily have to move away from Tannehill right now. Yes, he's a free agent after this season, but they could sign him for another year while they wait and see with Tua. The Panthers, Cam Newton. We don't know what's going on with Cam Newton. Is this the last we've seen of him as a Panther? They have Kyle Allen there, who's a solid backup quarterback. But he's not your franchise quarterback. So you should bring in some guy. You have a team built with deep threats like DJ Moore. Tua would be bonkers for that squad. So there's teams like that. You could even talk about like the Colts. Jacoby Brissett, he's on a 2-year contract. So maybe you bring in Tua, have him sit for a year, wait and see. You could talk about the Vikings with Kirk Cousins. He's got 1 more year after this season. Even the Packers, which they could take the same approach they did with Aaron Rodgers. After about 3 years, bam, you give the keys to the car, to the franchise, to Tua. Because over that period of time, you have prepped, you have prepared. Now you have confidence this guy could come in and stay healthy and know how to run your offense. So I think that Tua, there's no way he falls out of the first round at this point. No way. But I think definitely the teams that are willing to draft him have changed. So I think he becomes more, realistically his range right now is that 13th to 24th pick for me. But no questions asked, dude's a first round talent. Guys like Herbert now, jump him of course. I don't know if Jake Fromm or Jacob Eason are right now. I don't know if they would jump him. Which is kind of tough, man, because Eason, I'll talk about that in my positional video when I get later this week, because that's just gonna get us off target. But that's what I have to say, and that's it for the video. Like I said, if you want to hear more about how I feel about Jacob Eason, check out later this week when I have that positional rankings video out. And yeah, go ahead. If you enjoy the content, throw a thumbs up and become a bro and subscribe. It's much appreciated. Much obliged. Mock draft tomorrow. Be there for that. But until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.